So Dr. Siddharth Ramsh is a doctor by training, self-taught programmer on YouTube. He's new to openEHR, and I think he will bring his new insight and work about openEHR. So please, Dr. Siddharth.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm new to openEHR, as you can see, and my journey with openEHR began with trying to make digital forms. So my hospital had a lot of forms, and they wanted to make a digital version of that. And I discovered openEHR, started making these templates, and that's when I discovered how well thought out all of these archetypes were. Most of the things, almost 80 to 90% of the requirements were met by the archetypes in the CKM. And the community is also great. Dr. Ian helped me a lot with modeling all of these things, and I was successful in making the templates. Now comes the next question. What do you do with these templates? You need to make an application that actually persists onto a CDR, right? So that's when creating an open-air composition is actually really hard. And as even Mr. Christian told, they are coming up with these SDKs to actually interact with open-air, and making this instance is pretty hard. So the solutions we have right now are we can generate the clinical document instance using these tools that we have. Then we have an example endpoint in most of the CDRs that are coming inbuilt right now. And we have the EHR based SDK. But the problem with that is you need to have another layer of complexity. You need to have a certain other client running, and it's in Java, so you can't actually deploy it on your front end application. And web apps are mostly how people build apps these days. So I wanted something different. I wanted to, and then there are these form builders. There are these automated form builders that when you give a template, it automatically, generates this UI for you, and you can just drag and drop things around. So my dilemma was this: I need to make digital forms. So this needs to be made as soon as possible. So I could just manually, without the use of all these fancy form builders, without paying them, make them in 4 hours, getting the example compositions. But since I'm a self-taught programmer, I have to go the second way, and that's what I did. So that's I made it open source and called it Medblocks UI, and it got the work done. It kind of I was able to get usable interfaces out of a template. You just drag and drop a template, and it generates this sort of interface. But it doesn't look like this immediately. You need to go through a lot of configuration options in order to make it look like this. And in fact, I just put it up online, and a lot of people, that's the thing about code, right? Once you make it and you put it up, you don't know what people will make with it, wonderful things. And yeah, so people started using it, and it's not even fully done yet. Like you can see that the DV datetime is not implemented at that certain thing, but it's not even completed, and people are still trying to use it, and I was pleasantly surprised. So what's the problem with current form builders and all of these things? So the thing is, we are limited to a components that they give you. So if they don't have it in their library and they don't have it configured, you are out of luck. You can't do anything that you want. So that's mine, and that's Better's form builder. And sometimes the configuration gets really complex. Like, for example, this is a display function in my application where if this JavaScript expression returns true, it will show a particular part of the form. And if it returns false, it doesn't. Then, Better's form builder also has these sort of functions, round, min, max, etc. This is Solid Cloud's product, and they have a wonderful product. And again, that's just a JavaScript expression right there. And again, Better's form builder having APIs, so you can talk to different services. It got really, bloated at some point where I thought, when you have padding top, right, bottom, and left inside your form builder, are we just reinventing, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript again? Because it seems like using a GUI, we are almost building a very similar interface. And then there was this Twitter thread. And this particular comment got to me, which was, show me a low-code or Visuvig editor that can build this particular UI, and this is what the UI looks like. It's built by Dr. Mark Waddell from Wales, and it's for botulinum toxin administration. So you get you need to point out on the face where exactly you want to give this injection, and you mention the volume, and the units are automatically calculated. The total is automatically calculated. The side of the face is also computed automatically. So things like this is not really possible with form builders, right? So what has changed from then? Like, firstly, making a composition has become much more simpler now, thanks to simplified JSON formats, especially flat format, and there is almost universal coverage, including EHR base supports flat forms right now. And the backend has gotten much more complex. You have a lot of services and microservices running, and your application needs to talk to all of them. So the backend has changed dramatically. And front end also has changed. The way we deploy apps today is mostly as web applications. Gone are the days where you make a single standalone desktop application for each computer. Making web apps just is easier. Like, you can deploy it faster, you can iterate much faster. And as a result, most of the heavy lifting and the logic has moved on to the front end. And the back end is just like a persistence layer that the front end uses. And so we have this explosion of tooling, right? We have Angular, React, Vue, and hundreds of other frameworks coming out every month or so. And these frameworks will change, but the concept is here to stay. So then the platform itself has evolved. Like, browsers right now support something called web components. So you can have this sort of a HTML element, and thus this element can be used anywhere. Like, it can be used in Vue, React, Angular, and it can also be used in your backend frameworks. So if you have a Django application or a Spring Boot application, you can embed this in your templates, and it will show up on the page without any issue. So this is a browser technology. It's not specific to any particular vendor again. And people already use it. Like, if you've seen the YouTube sign-in button, they're using web components. Like, almost 30 to 40% of the web uses web components already. And this is EHR Studio, and their form renderer already uses a web component. That's how they deploy these forms. So I thought, why do we just have this one form renderer that talks to their own, vendor specific form rendering API and gets the display? Instead of that, why don't we have something open that can do something like this? Like, you have an MB form, which is Medblocks form, and under that you have all that you want, and you can align them any way you like. You can have it in columns, tabs, and all of that is handled by normal HTML. And this final thing will then output a composition. So this also enables us to build sort of components that talk to each microservice separately. So like microservices, now you can also have micro frontends. So I'll just show you what is possible right now. So this is the setup. We have a basic template just for a demo. So we have a problem diagnosis, we have a blood pressure archetype, and we have a pulse or heartbeat. And this ID is initial assessment v0.1. And we have an EHR base instance running right now on port 8080. And this is just a EHR ID that I generated. Now let's see. Like, first what you do is you make a HTML file, and you get a web template of that. Just export a web template, put it in this directory. Then you get a snippet. You just copy and paste these snippets from the Medblocks UI NPM or GitHub page. And after this, we also have a Medblocks. So first we need to create these components, these custom elements, and you see the submit button automatically generates that particular button. This is the Medblocks UI VS Code extension, right? And so here we have all of these things generated from the template. We can copy all of that directly and paste it as snippets, and we have a UI generating right there, and that's it. So for example, if you don't want this problem diagnosis to be a select and you want it to be a search, you just replace that with another component, and right now it's talking to a SNOMED CT search engine in the background with the constraint of condition. So we are filling that out, and right now we are just making the defaults mmHG so that people don't have to fill that out every single time. And all of this can look any way you want. Again, now we are pasting Axios so that we can actually talk to the EHR base instance to make this composition persist. So all we need to do is get the form using a query selector and create an Axios instance and give that as the CDR. The template, give it as the template. The EHR ID, give it as EHR. And on submit, we basically do form.post. And that's basically it. I'm just going to show you as an alert right now. And let's fill this out again. So this can look any way you want. And here, we just talked to EHR base, and this is a response coming from EHR base. Again, you see that the UID has been created, and this composition has been sent. So using this, you can make a basic looking UI in about 2 to 3 minutes. But that's the point. This is just to show you a demo, and there is not many fancy styling, and all of that is up to you. You can customize it using CSS. So all of this is open today, Medblocks UI components and the Medblocks UI VS Code extension. And you can download it, use it, give me feedback. So what about this? This looked pretty complex. Is this possible using our form builder? Yeah, of course it is. Like, let's do that right now. And I'll show you the setup. So we have a bottle-in medication template, and it has precise anatomical location to store the XY coordinates. It has dosage archetype, which has the amount in units. And using this template, let's just extract the web template of this and put it in our directory, and we are going to build it. But it takes a long time, so I'm just going to show you the final end product and just explain it to you. So this is the final end product. I mean, there is no standardized face, right? So I'm just using my face. So based on the side clicked, it gets left face or right face, and you see that it is automatically calculated. And upon submit, it submits a composition. Again, here we are using EHR base. It submits this composition directly to EHR base from the front end. So how did we do this? So we are using Svelte. Svelte is just another front-end library like Angular, Vue, or React. And using that, we are generating this HTML. Like, so that Svelte renders this HTML. So every time somebody clicks on this face, the state changes. The state is basically injections, right? So every time somebody clicks on this particular face, the X and Y coordinates of this is registered as injection. And as the array changes, our Svelte, the framework takes care of rendering things as it should. And here there is just an each loop. So it's just a for loop. You'll be very familiar if you use Vue or React. So it's just a for loop. And what we're doing here is for each injection, we need to generate a particular row, right? So for each row, we are generating the path here, and we are dynamically generating the path so that the platform is respected properly for each element. And this is the medication item, and we are just setting it as botulinum, and it's just a text field. So we are just setting it as, we could have made it SNOMED CT, but it's botulinum, and we are hiding it. So it's there in the background. But since we are using the CSS class is hidden to hide it, it doesn't show up on the interface. And again, MB input, this is for the body site name. So again, the body site name, we are generating the path dynamically. And here for the data, we are generating whether it's a right face or left face based on what the X value is. So you can dynamically do these things right inside of your web component instead of having fancy tooling. The GUI that does this. And here again, MB quantity, we are binding the injection.x to a quantity. So since quantity takes in unit and magnitude, we are doing it like that. And this is also hidden. So it doesn't show up here, but it's there. So all of this, you can just copy and paste using the Medblocks UI VS Code extension. So if you do that, it'll also show you whether your interface currently is compliant with this template. So this template right now is not compliant. It shows that some exclamatory marks here. So you have to make sure that those snippets are also pasted and those are present. Everything else has a double check. So it means it's all fine. So what about this? How are we computing this automatically when a user inputs dose amount? So the dose amount is an MB quantity. So we are binding to that directly on MB input. MB input is just whenever people type in, it changes that. So on changing, we bind directly to injections again. So we change the state of injections every time somebody changes this. And once that is changed, we can again render using the normal flow. So here we are doing total ML and the units. So that's just JavaScript. We are doing a map reduce and we get out the result. And all of the styling was done using CSS, right? Like I used Boomer and some CSS, but you can use any framework of your choice. You can use Bootstrap, Tailwind, everything is fine. So what about retrieving the composition? We are posting it and all that is fine, but what about getting it back? Uh, I made a full demo. I wanted to show you, but then it's pretty long and it was not possible within this time frame. So I'm just showing you what I'm doing here. So there is a load function where if you put the UUID, I'm just going to Google and coming back to show you that it works. It still loads back excuse me, sorry about that. So yeah, it still loads back the information on the screen. So that is how the load works, and exactly how it works is we get the composition using this form.getUID. Again, this makes a request to EHR base, gets the form, and we have some helper functions like getStructured, which will take the path until which you want and then map, get it in a structured form. So its platforms are not easy to work with when you're especially making some JavaScript manipulation. So for that, we have the structured form, and this will get the structured form. Even though EHR base doesn't support structured form right now, it gets it using JavaScript code in the front end. And then we can then map that to injections directly. And once you set that, we have the state, right? So state directly renders that out to our UI. And all of these things like anatomical location, precise anatomical location, X offset magnitude, all of these can just be copied and pasted using the copy ID of the Medblocks UI extension. And you can use any framework actually. It need not be Svelte. All of these frameworks support loading a state and rendering things. So all of these can be used. Angular, Vue, Preact all support it fully. React doesn't because it's just weird like that. So don't use React if you want to use this. So the thing is, frameworks change all the time, but browsers are here to exist, right? Browsers are going to be here, and all of the browsers today support custom elements and web components. They're stable, and a lot of people use it. So don't rely on a single JavaScript framework, but rely on standard DOM implementations and browser technology that is going to stay for a long time. As Christian also said, like it's not exotic technology, it's stable, people are using it, and it's all fine. So now, can you use it in your handlebars or Django or PHP template? Absolutely, it's just HTML. You can use it anywhere. Can you have responsive layouts? In fact, the previous one I showed you, the previous example was responsive, and we are doing that using normal media queries. Can you use it with X? If the browser supports it, yes, you can use it with anything else in the browser too. So can you create new components? Yeah, you can, and I will show you an example. So here we are describing a new component called crazy quantity to replace our normal quantity. You will know why it's called crazy in some time. And we are just including that script tag. And we have a Medblocks UI configuration file where you can tell the extension, hey, this is a new snippet that I want to include. And once you go to your index file, you can just go to the extension and you see that it'll show up. The crazy quantity snippet shows up. And you just replace that snippet with any snippet of your choice. In this case, we are using the crazy quantity, and it shows up. So it's not the best example, but that looks like our systolic. So I don't recommend that you use this particular example, but you can use your own components. You can bring your own components when you have a design language. So when you are using something like Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS in your own project, you can bring your design system into Medblocks UI. Instead of using the MB quantity, you can have your own company's quantity text and coded text elements. Although you would have to design a lot of things to talk to the microservices like search and SnowMed City and all that. So all of this was built on the shoulder of giants, especially EHR base for all of the persisting and all of that. So Hermes was the terminology service that I used. It has a Fire implementation too. And it was built by Dr. Mark Waddle, the same guy who showed the demo of the bottle and injection. And other technologies like Svelte, Shoelace, and Lit Element were used in the actual product and the demo. So the documentation is not great. I'm still working on it. The code is the documentation for now. So any questions?
Thank you. Very excellent work. So now it's time for questions. Is there any questions?
Good morning, Dr. Siddharth. I have a question.
Yeah.
Dr. Siddharth, when you are trying to map onto the openEHR reference model data types, so if you are introducing a new crazy quantity as a data type, then what do you think how you will be mapping it to the openEHR RM model?
Yeah, good question. So what we have is we have a base model from which all of these models extend from. So if you have a crazy quantity, it still needs to implement the quantity base model properly. So the quantity base model will have units and magnitude, for example. So in this case, the base model for quantity should be extended by this crazy quantity, and then there they can extend their, implement their own rendering function. So the quantity need not look a certain way. It can look any way you want. You can do the validation any way you want, but it should implement the base thing, which is all implemented in TypeScript. So I can show you an example if you want to, but
I got it. I understood that. And the next question to you is, how will the clinicians or the doctors in your hospital be able to query this particular system? Because you are storing the compositions, you are retrieving the compositions, but the person who is not being aware of that what a composition is, so might not be able to understand it. So is there an easy to use interface to be used by the doctors in the hospitals that should be able to query, okay, this is for example, the query is like this one, find all the patients between the systolic pressures between this particular range.
Got it.
So is there a UI?
So this is basically meant as a tool for developers to build interfaces. So if you talk about querying an interface, you have AQL. So if you use AQL and get the data directly from something like EHR base or any openEHR repository, you get that data and then you display it onto your page. So if you think about an app, it will have multiple templates and it will have multiple views, right? One will be entering data, one will be editing data. And just like that, you can have a dashboard for different kinds of views where the doctor wants to see all the patients above this particular blood pressure. So things like that you need to do with AQL and your front-end technology. Again, like you can use any framework and you can also just build it from scratch. So Medblocks UI right now hasn't done too much on the AQL side of things. It's mostly about entering data as compositions, but AQL is already well supported as just a JSON standard. Like you can just make a request, get that data and display it. So it's not meant for doctors to be using directly. It's more as a tool for developers to build upon.
Okay, thank you so much. But for implementing an AQL, as far as to the best of my knowledge, I guess AQL parser and the license for that also needs to be purchased before we should.
Not really. I feel you can execute AQL pretty straightforward. Like if building AQL is an issue, I think the German team is again coming up with a few open source tools. I think maybe Mr. Christian will be able to tell more. But yeah, I feel if you understand the AQL spec pretty well, you can compose your own AQL, get the data, and display it however you want.
Yeah, regarding the AQL editor, we are currently, well, actually, it's almost pre-release. We have an SDK tool to implement AQL queries. Actually, I'm using it for test. So it's Java-based again, but it's not graphical, if that is your question. But I would say when it comes to that, also implementing straight AQL queries, it's not really difficult, really. But you can use the tool, you can use the SDK, and you can also have a peek to figure out what is the actual AQL queries if needed.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so thanks, Sinas. So next speaker will be Dr. Shan Nan.